Arthur Moats back on Pony and Muller. Arthur, our good friend Mark Cabali today described Kenny Pickett as a spring practice loser. Does Arthur Moats agree or disagree?
Well, put it like this. If he's a spring practice loser, it's solely based on the expectations that a lot of media and fans have tried to put on him. This whole, because he's the 20th overall selection, it's a waste if you don't start him and all these other things. I think that it creates a sense of pressure on him and an expectation for him that as a rookie who already we knew coming in wasn't the quote-unquote one in a million, once in a generation prospect, yeah, he was going to struggle. But I don't think that it's more so a knock on Kenny. I think that it's more so just a big tip to the cap to Mitch Trubisky. I think that what he's been doing since he's come here has really shown what the difference is between a guy that's been a Pro Bowler, that's been in this league for multiple years versus a rookie. And I think that when we all start to see that, we realize that on just a day-to-day basis of watching minicamp and watching OTA practices, for us that were privy to that opportunity, we saw it and it was really clear who the main guy was and who was kind of third in that list. But it's not to say that Kenny can't grow into that. It's just that Mitch is a more, proven prospect. He's a more further down that line. He's already been through what Kenny is going through right now. But don't get discouraged about Kenny. It's just that when you're talking about him trying to be a week one starter, no, he didn't do anything to me that would have closed that gap against Mitch Trubisky, but more so because of how well Mitch played during these spring practices.
How closely are coaches watching? Like, we've heard this from so many people that, like, it seems Mitch is commanding the whole, everything he can command. He's acting like the starter. Guys are gravitating towards him in that way, Arthur. How close of attention do you think the coaching staff just pays to that in general? How much stock do you think they put in the fact that the veteran who's coming in here thinking he was going to start all along is acting like it? How much does that matter?
I mean, it matters, but at the same time, you still have to have the on-field part. Because we've seen plenty of guys that will give you all the leadership qualities. They do all the intangible things. They show up early. They stay late. They want to get the guys together, do all the camaraderie and stuff like that. But the on-field just isn't there. Whereas when you talk about Mitch, he's been able to combine the two. So when you talk about how he's been acting, I can tell you firsthand from what I've been seeing down there every practice that, yeah, he operates like a QB1, but he looks like he's done this before because he has. He's been the rookie in Chicago. Then he became the head guy in Chicago. So he understands how to lead men. He understands how to operate in practice, how to operate inside the huddle, what to do when you turn and when you're staying after, how to conduct extra work in the film rooms. These are all things that Kenny is trying to adapt and learn. And it's not a knock on Kenny, but Kenny's a rookie. And as a rookie, and I can say this as a veteran in the league, it takes some time for those guys to earn your respect.
Yeah.
You don't just look to them and say, hey, I want to follow this guy, I want to gravitate to this guy. You're saying, bro, you don't know anything. You just got here. And a lot of times veterans feel some type of way towards rookies because we feel like we've had to work so much harder to get the status that we've gotten, whereas a rookie, depending on where they're drafted, you can go from being, a regular guy at a university, now you're a first-round pick, and you got these expectations that you're supposed to be a world beater. And for us as veterans, we're like, no, you need to prove it. Prove it. And I think that's the phase that's happening right now. But it's not a negative, though. Like I said, for Kenny, This is all a part of that process. You have to go through this. You have to earn your stripes. And he's only been an NFL player now for what, a little over a month now? So I think he has some time, man. For Kenny, I just think, man, for him, training camp in the preseason games are where if he's going to make a move to try to be starting quarterback week one, he's going to have to do it then. But during OTAs, I personally didn't have that expectation for him because he's a rookie and he's playing quarterback and it's a lot of stuff going on. And even though he's a little bit older as a rookie, it still is different when you come into that NFL locker room.
Arthur Moats, former Steelers dealer and analyst with us here on Pony and Muller. So if you are Mason Rudolph and you leave now for a 6-week or 7-week break, how would you feel based on how the spring practices went, Arthur?
Man, if you're Mason, you feel good because obviously for me, I thought Mason was the second best quarterback out there. But this is the context. This is the caveat that you have to be. If you're Mason, you have to understand that this is coming. You're number 2 right now because you were the more consistent guy in contrast to Kenny, who is a younger player who is going through just learning this process. But you're not going to have that advantage, per se, the second week of training camp when Kenny has his legs up under him because athletically, Kenny was the more athletic guy, and that's nothing new, but Mason was the more consistent passer from my perspective. But once Kenny catches up from a consistency part with his arm, now you're having this conversation of, well, if, two guys are the same, you go with the younger guy here. Mason and Kenny, they're not too far off from my perspective. Once Kenny gets a little bit more consistent with his arm and stuff like that, and that's just at the NFL level, not just as a passer, but as a NFL passer. When he gets there, and I don't think he's going to take too much longer to get there, but once he does, that gap is closed. So if you're Mason, yeah, you feel good about how you perform right now, but you definitely feel the pressure of Kenny because Kenny still did some good things during OTAs.
Arthur, on a scale of 1 to 10, how absurd does Najee Harris look?
Man, looks like a G.I. Joe action figure. No exaggeration. That was the first thing I noticed the first day I saw him during this all-season program. And it's just unreal, but not just the size element of it. You watch him when he moves. And granted, I have the luxury of being down there, but when training camp hits and everybody's able to see these things that me, Mark Cabali, a lot of the other media guys have seen, you will understand why we're so excited about him. Yet, when you look at him, you can physically see the added size. But to me, I think he's way more fluid in his hips. I think that the explosiveness is there, and I also think that he's just a more patient, more mature runner right now based on what I was seeing in practice. And granted, it's helmets only, so you take it with a grain of salt. But for certain players, you can gauge certain things. And for Najee, when you're talking about his explosiveness, you're talking about him getting in and out of cuts, you talk about him even running routes, you can see a noticeable improvement, a noticeable difference based on what he's doing this year in contrast to last year, even if he's 244 pounds.
Arthur, thank you. I'm glad you did that. Thank you. Can you, as somebody that has crossed over to the dark side and become a media member after being a professional football player, can you please, somehow get word to Najee that he'll know it when we're being critical of him and that everyone was kissing his very well-muscled derriere and not calling him fat like he tried to suggest? That was ridiculous, man.
I'm with you 100%. Now, when I heard that about Najee, I'm like, listen now, they haven't been mean to you just yet. You haven't even had a bad game just yet. You are all right. If you think this is bad, no. Just wait, my friend. Hopefully it never comes to that. But, yeah, I would not call this, quote-unquote, weight gate, whatever we want to label this as the media getting on Najee. Hopefully he doesn't experience it, but if you play this game long enough, you will. And that was not it.
No, the G.I. Joe description is what has me saying he's going to lead the NFL in rushing this year. I'm all in.
When he puts pads on, he's going to look like the final boss of a video game.
I am all in on Najee Harris. I'm buying everything that he's selling, and I don't want to even have anything that comes close to making it sound like it's an opinion that's going to piss the guy off.
Arthur, Pony said lead the league in rushing, break Barry Foster's single-season Steelers rushing record, and win NFL Offensive Player of the Year. He put 3 Najee predictions out there into the mists today.
And the fans are loving it.
I mean, when you talk about leading the league in rushing, I don't think that that's too far off. Obviously, he had a ton of rushing yards last year, and I do think that that's going to increase based on the improvement of the offensive line.
Yes.
But, man, you talk about Offensive Player of the Year. Man, come on now. These receivers out here, these
I'm optimistic.
Out here, that's not an easy award. They don't just give that out.
I know. I'm just a very optimistic person. What can I tell you? I like asking you questions like the one about Rudolph, where as a former professional athlete and former Steeler, you get into the head of the player because you've been in their shoes to some extent. And so if you're Deontay Johnson, all these big wide receiver contracts are going out. Renfro gets $16 million a year today. And Aditi told us on Monday, Arthur, that they haven't even started, the Steelers haven't even begun conversations with Johnson about a contract extension. So if you're him, how do you feel about your situation right now, if, I'll put the caveat on it, if all of that is true?
Well, put it like this. I'm sure to an extent, when you're talking about official conversations, yeah, that could very well be the case. But at the same time, they've had some type of, my agent knows what my number is, they know what I'm looking for. You have that vibe, because I know from my personal experiences, even when I was going through mine, before we had a technical, official conversation, we already were having a little bit of fillers going on and stuff like that. So both sides are aware in some capacity. But in terms of how would you feel if you're Deontay, I mean, it's a mixed emotion. You're partly pissed off because you feel like, man, I've I was drafted here. I've produced here. I've gotten better each and every year, regardless of who's been at quarterback, whether it was Mason, whether it was Duck, whether it was Ben, whether it was elderly Ben, however we want to refer to him. He's still improved each and every year. He has a Pro Bowl under his belt. And you say to yourself, well, man, I've done all this for you, and I wasn't even a first-round pick. This is the time for you to turn around and say, hey, I appreciate that, and I think you got more in the tank. Let me compensate you. But when you feel like you're not getting that, or they're not approaching you at a number that you would like early on, yeah, it can make you very upset. And I think also that he's been handling it the best way possible. When you look around the league globally, you look at DK Metcalf and how he's handling it. You talk about A.J. Brown. You talk about, oh, my God, I'm drawing a blank, but a couple of the other guys that have been out here and have been very vocal and adamant about not showing up or being frustrated. Debo Samuel, he's the guy I was thinking about. But in terms of how they've been very heavy-handed in their approach, and you think about the distraction, you think about the negativity that has surrounded them. Whereas with Deontay, all it took for him to kind of silence a lot of the negativity and the hearsay, she say, was just him showing up to work. That was it. And by him doing that, number one, let the team know that he's still committed. But number two, it was also good for him because now you're still getting your work. You're still growing with these guys and these new quarterbacks that you're going to be working with, because at the end of the day, you're still going to want to be your most productive self this season, because if the deal doesn't get done this offseason, well, you got the franchise tag on the table. And if that isn't on the table, well, then, okay, if you're going to hit the open market, you really want to be able to have one of those hot seasons so you can really break the bank. So everything is in Deontay's corner in terms of why you should show up. But at the end of the day, yeah, he's going to be frustrated until that check gets cut, because he's definitely earned it to some extent. The biggest issue to me, though, is these other teams that have messed up the wide receiver market. You're paying good players great money. And now you have this market where, you know, a guy that should get 15 to 18 is getting 20 to 23, and now we're stuck over here having to play this game of, do we pay this guy over, you know, what we know he's worth because that's what the market says, or do we stick to what we do and do it the Steeler way, even if that might piss him off? And that's kind of the dilemma that I see happening right now.
Arthur, I'll ask you another one about that'll allow you to kind of get really into the head of a player maybe in this case, and it's about a guy I just randomly have thought of when this defense gets talked about so much, because he doesn't get brought up a whole lot. It's all about Bush or Hayward or Alu coming back or Minka. What do you think Alex Highsmith is thinking right now, entering year 3, as the not T.J. Watt of the two outside linebackers on this starting 11?
Alex Highsmith is chomping at the bit. I've had a chance to talk to him. He's ready to go. This dude, when I watched him throughout the OTA minicamp process, physically looks great. I think that he's a way more mature rusher, a way more just confident player because he has multiple seasons under his belt. You look at what he was able to do last year, not just as a pass rusher, but also as a run defender. He set the edge really well. Even though the whole run defense needed to be improved, I thought that he still did some really positive things, and he really took some steps in the right direction. So, yeah, for Alex Highsmith, I think nothing less than double-digit sacks and being one of those prominent run defenders where you know, hey, you can't run that ball that way, and he's going to win his fair share of pass rushing opportunities. But he should be a double-digit sack guy. That, to me, has to be his mindset. And from talking with him, that is his mindset. He feels like he's capable of that. And I really don't see why he shouldn't, because T.J. Watt is still going to attract a ton of attention. Cam Hayward is still going to attract a ton of attention. And if whether it be Chris Wormley, who had, 6-7 sacks last year, whether it be Montravius Adams, who came in and gave you productivity, whether it be the young guy, DeMarvin Leal, hopefully emerging and stepping up sooner rather than later, all of those guys are going to ultimately allow Alex Highsmith to have a ton of one-on-ones. And he is a guy that I think can win those at a good rate, and that's ultimately what's going to get him into that view of, man, this is a guy that we need to be worried about. This is a guy that we should be preparing to pay in the next, coming years and stuff like that. That's what I see for Alex.